I want to tell you an interesting story about a student that I had before. And I think you're going to relate a lot to certain parts of this story. And I really want you to focus on which parts seem similar to the way that you think and the way that you might conduct yourself and the strategies that you might have, and which parts differ, because there's a lot of learning that you can gain from this. So, this is a story of a student called Sam. And I met Sam in his second to last year of high school. So, we'll just represent Sam with this stick figure here. Sam was a pretty driven guy. He was a prefect at a school. He was one of those students that have, like numerous badges on his blazer. He was a relatively high achiever at the time that I met him. He was achieving probably in the top sort of 20% of his year group, and his school was also pretty high ranking as well. So, top 20% in his year group probably equated to something more close to maybe the top 5 to 10% in the entire country, so nationwide. So he was relatively high achieving already when I met him. And the reason that he actually talked to me was for career guidance and information about entering into university. So he was aiming to enter into quite a prestigious university and enter into a very competitive degree. So he knew that even though he was doing relatively well at this, top 5 to 10%, he actually was aiming to get results closer to the top 1 to 2% of the year nationwide by the time he was entering into university so that he could go and do his degree of choice. In Sam's case, he was aiming to enter into medical school, but honestly, I've worked with a lot of students who have wanted to do engineering, law, just even entrepreneurship, and they've had the same kind of story that Sam had. So I met him at the beginning of his second to last year, and as you can see, his basic foundation here is relatively good. All right. So people would look and say that Sam is a pretty good student and a pretty high achiever. And he was pretty confident at his success as well. He knew that he was achieving roughly top 5 to 10% nationwide, and he had a lot of confidence going into it. We had a consultation. I talked to Sam. I said, hey, man, this is what I think that you need to work on and do. I gave him certain advice, and I worked with him for a pretty short period of time, actually, only a few weeks. I gave him a list of things that he needed to improve on. And I said, look, some of these are red flags. If you don't fix these, you're going to run into trouble. Some of these are probably okay. However, you still need to get onto it ASAP. He gave it a go. He tried to fix these things and he put in some effort for the first few weeks. And he ultimately found that it was actually quite difficult to change some of these. They were kind of like habits that had been ingrained in the way that he studies and thinks. And so he never really had challenged himself in this way. And trying to overcome this was pretty difficult. Like I was telling him to change the way that he's writing his notes. I was telling him that he needs to change the way that he's revising. I was telling him that he needs to create a different type of schedule. I was giving him tips on how to reduce procrastination, because that was one thing that he used to do a lot. For Sam specifically, he was a very heavy YouTube procrastinator, more so than social media as such, because he didn't even, I don't think he even had a Facebook or Instagram. So he used to procrastinate by watching YouTube for sometimes, hours and hours and not study at all that day. So I gave him a bunch of tips. I gave him some strategies and some plans that would effectively just crush and remove all of these barriers from him. But he did find it quite hard because he's just so used to that way of thinking. Why did I only work with him for a few weeks? Because he found it hard and he wasn't able to overcome this eventually. There was the hurdle in place, but he was not actually able to overcome it in the few weeks that I worked with him. And this is because he found it difficult and he told himself, look, I'm already achieving pretty well for my current level. I'm doing pretty well. Let's just see how I do. If I just try a little bit harder, he should be able to get that top 1 to 2%. And I think that's because Sam knew that he wasn't really trying very hard. I think at the very beginning, when I was evaluating him, he said he was only giving about 70% of his total effort. So in his mind, he's thinking, all right, I'll give 30% more effort, really try my hardest, and that should allow me to pull ahead a lot more and get that really, really top result that he was looking for. And he wouldn't have to go through this arduous process of changing the way that he studies and the way that he thinks and the way that he manages his time. And he's not going to have to, give up YouTube, or he can kind of overcome that with his willpower and will and all of that sort of stuff. So that was kind of what Sam's plan was. I said, look, honestly, I would be more comfortable if you stuck with this plan, but at the end of the day, you do you. A year later, Sam gets in touch with me again. So actually a year and a half later, halfway through the year, because the results that he's getting for that year put him on track to not get in the top 2%. In fact, the results put him on track to get in the top 10 to 15%. So actually less than before. So he's actually now doing worse than before. And Sam is telling me that he did, in fact, try much harder. He says that he was trying twice as hard. He wasn't even trying 70% before. Forget that. He was trying 50%, and now he is truly trying at 100%. Yet for some reason, his results actually got worse. And by the end of the year, when the results came out, Sam didn't actually make it into the university they wanted to get into. He didn't make it into the degree that he wanted to get into either. His results ended up being around the top 15% by the end of the year as well. And there was actually nothing that we could do for Sam. It was just too little, too late, and he had sort of squandered his time too much. So when you look at the story, right, where do you think Sam kind of tripped up on? Okay, yeah, he should have listened to my advice, sure, but you can see why Sam would have thought what he thought. He was already doing pretty well. He was pretty confident. He wasn't trying his hardest. So it does make sense that if he tried harder, he should be able to pull ahead and get better results. Maybe it's ambitious to think that 30% more effort can give you, a increasing result of 5 to 8%, but at least not do even worse than he was doing previously by trying harder. And this is the thing, is like I said before, trying harder is not always the solution. In fact, a lot of the time, it's really not the solution, because sometimes you need to be trying just under your optimum, or just under, your maximum level of effort in order to have enough reserve to keep yourself optimum enough, healthy mentally and emotionally, to actually perform well. And sometimes when you try too hard, you actually just burn out more without increasing your results by a significant amount. And even if you do get a little bit better, you actually end up burning out so much more that it just completely overwhelms however much you improved, and you ultimately end up doing actually worse. So in this case, trying harder can actually lead to doing worse, because you just increase the burnout rate rather than just directly transferring into results. And this is something that a lot of students really underestimate. And this is the thing that I was worried about for Sam. And if you're watching this, this is the same thing that I'd be worried about for a lot of you, is that you may be pretty confident with what you're doing right now, but it's important to realize that just because it works right now, there's no guarantee that it will continue to work for you in the future when challenges actually get harder. You need to make sure that what you're able to do now, you can do with as little effort as possible. So if you're achieving grades in the top 20 to 10% now, how much effort are you putting in? If you're trying pretty hard to get that result, then that's a sign that your current method is not going to be working for you 1 or 2 or 3 years from now. So you need to actually make these changes earlier on. You need to be achieving results in the top 20 to 10% and try half the amount of effort that you're putting in right now. That means that when you do try harder, you actually can get that increase in results. But you would never know that if it's just a theory in your head. You do actually have to practice this. And I think if we really drill down, the area was here. This was the problem point, was that Sam was expecting it to be maybe relatively straightforward, just here a tip here and there, and then figure out a way to overcome all of these challenges and become more efficient. But the thing is that it's not that easy. When it got hard, Sam thought that he could avoid this, he could bypass this. And so the way that I want you to think about this is like going to the gym. If you're going to the gym and you lift up a weight and the weights feel really heavy, you wouldn't say that it's the gym's fault for having such heavy weights, and you wouldn't say that it's the weight's fault for being so heavy. The problem is in being too weak to be able to lift it. So if the objective is to get stronger and the weight feels too heavy, then what we need to do is we need to actually keep lifting that weight, not despite the fact that it's heavy, but because of the fact that it's heavy. So we need to do the thing that's difficult to do, and especially the things that I outline in this course, because the things that I would teach you are, again, fundamentally, they're evidence-based. We know that they work, and they work consistently when you put in the right effort and you actually practice it diligently, but don't always expect it to be easy. Think about it as you're working out, you're studying and learning muscle. And you also can't cram this in. What Sam tried to do when I saw him again the middle of his final year of high school, he realized that he was not on track. And so I actually worked with him again for a period of another maybe 4 to 5 weeks. It was honestly not an enjoyable experience because he was still very reluctant to actually make changes. I would say the first 3 or 4 weeks were totally wasted because he was always holding himself back from making any changes. But he always thought that he had more time. He thought that he could just cram in these changes before the exam and then he'd be able to reap the rewards. Well, just like if you're trying to become a professional tennis player, you can't just cram in all of your practice into one weekend and expect that you're just as good as someone who's practiced consistently. Skills actually take time and consistency to develop. You can't go into the gym once a week and do your entire week's worth of workout in that one day and get just as strong as someone that's doing those workouts spaced out throughout the week regularly. It just doesn't work that way. Our body and our mind is not built to work and develop that way. So consistency is key here, and consistency despite the adversity is what Sam did not have, and that's the problem that he faced. You may be listening to this thinking, look, that's not relevant for me. That's not going to be me. In the thousands of students that I've worked with, I can definitively say that the most common reason that students will not improve is because they do not push through the adversity of using a new, potentially challenging, potentially even slightly scary technique. Maybe they're too worried about getting it perfectly right the first time, but at the end of the day, they sort of sit back and think, I can do that later. I'll get onto that later. I've got other things I need to worry about now. I'll finish this first. But the thing is, later is always later. Later, you'll have other things that you need to worry about now. And so it will continue to get pushed back later. People who will make it and actually reap the rewards of the system and the resources and these new techniques and actually have what it takes to achieve in the top 1 or 2% or even greater than that, they're the ones that don't put things off for later. They do things now and they realize that consistency and patience goes a long way, far more, I can tell you, than just raw talent or intelligence goes. So if you struggle to use any of the techniques that we teach you, just like it's not the weight's fault or the gym's fault, it's probably not the fault of this research-based, evidence-based technique that has worked for thousands of other students. It's probably because you're trying to rush it a little bit and you're not being patient and consistent. So you need to put in the work, you need to put in the consistency, and the earlier that you're able to be honest with yourself and know whether you're rushing things or you're putting things off or you're slacking, the earlier you can be honest with yourself, the better your results are going to be. But you have to keep yourself accountable. If you do the work, you will get the results. However, obviously, if you don't do the work, you won't get the results. So use this community, find new friends, and use those as peers to keep yourself accountable. Use your family to keep you accountable. Use your schoolmates to keep you accountable and keep yourself accountable. The problem is that most people quit and don't see the results. If you go into a gym on January the 2nd. Every year it's packed. All these people with New Year's resolutions saying this year's going to be different. Wait a month, go into that gym on February the 2nd, and the gym is pretty much empty because all of these people have quit because they didn't see these instantaneous results. What you need to do is be prepping in the corner and just grinding out that work consistently so that 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, when you look back and think about the life that you've been able to create for yourself and the success you've been able to achieve, you can say it's because you laid down the foundation earlier, you were willing to put in the hustle, but the hustle in the right way, consistently and patiently.